And now, ladies and gentlemen,
Put your thumbs up and say it's Tickety Boo.
Tickety Boo.
Tickety Boo, Tickety Boo, everything's Tickety Boo.
Tickety Boo, son. Tickety Boo.
Tickety Boo!
Welcome to the Tickety Boo podcast. Today, we're diving into how the past likes to tag along with us, especially in our relationships. Ever found yourself reacting to something small and thinking, oh, that's definitely my baggage talking? Well, you're not alone. We'll chat about those unresolved issues that sometimes sneak out and spill onto others, and how to stop them from running the show. We'll get real, we'll have a little laugh about how to handle the past without letting it control the present. So, welcome to this episode where we're going to have a bit of a conversation about how our past can have an influence in our present, how not owning our stuff can intentionally or unintentionally lead us bleeding onto other people. So wanted to have a chat today about how our stuff, how our past can impact our relationships with our family, with our friends, with our partners, with our colleagues, all of these things. And some of the stuff that we've seen turning up in the therapy room as well, consistent patterns of behaviour, things that people find themselves in. So I don't want to make it all about dating and relationships, because that's a big area that I'm sure we will venture into at some point in the future. But yeah, where do we start?
Well, I suppose I better start because this was what was on my mind this time.
It was his idea. So
It was his
idea.
fault, yeah.
No pressure. Over to you, Ian.
Yeah, is it too late to pivot?
That was
Not
the
too
last
sure about
episode.
this one now. Right, well, the reason that this one's on my mind, it was just purely things that had come through my room this week. I've got some friends that are entering into new relationships, and I've been speaking to some clients, 2 clients this week, that are having issues forming new relationships with people because, well, one is because people that they're trying to enter into a relationship to, I'm not necessarily saying dating, they're still pretty hung up on past traumas and different issues that they've had. So they don't know what they're looking for in a relationship, and so are my clients. A lot of what we've spoken about this week has been about understanding what your part was in those outcomes within them relationships, because instantly saying whether it's a family member, a partner, your first instinct is to accuse them of all the wrong and saying it was their fault. But sometimes you've got to self-reflect and just say, right, okay, how did I enable them to behave that way? What were my triggers? Why was I triggered? How did I react to that? And moving forwards, forging new relationships, what will my new boundaries be? Because ultimately my boundaries are my boundaries. They're nobody else's boundaries, they're just mine, so I need to know what they are.
I think when people end up in the therapy room, certainly what I've seen, is there is a pattern that seems to play out through their life and through their relationships with both friends and life partners, or in their relationships. But sometimes when you're in it, it can be quite difficult to see it. And as you said, that ability to take personal responsibility and take a look at your own stuff, because let's be honest, when we're not in a good place and we're emotional and we're stressed, we don't always make the best decisions. Big emotion doesn't always allow for good quality thinking. And the people I see in the therapy room are conforming to a story that they tell themselves, or a flawed set of beliefs. And very often when I'm speaking to people, I can see myself in those individuals at certain parts in my life.
Yes.
As well. So we're not actually finger pointing here, because I think all of us have this ability to fall into these traps of certain behaviours in relationships.
And also, just for our listeners, I want to say, we're not saying that it's your fault and look at where you've gone wrong if you're in an abusive relationship or a narcissistic relationship. That will be for another time. So we're not saying that this is, you need to look at where you have gone wrong and your contribution. Those are very specific topics that we will address another time.
Yeah, we're not. They say it's not about finger pointing and blaming and all the rest of it. You know, you look on the internet, there's loads of gurus out there bashing people who are avoidant or they're anxious or they're a narcissist. In fact, a lot of the stuff that you see on the internet is they're a narcissist, they're a narcissist, they're a narcissist. We all have the ability at times to have narcissistic traits and behave in narcissistic ways, but it seems to be now the label is they've done something, therefore they are a narcissist. And we're not about, certainly in this episode, about defining people like that, but I think it's more about this being able to reflect and making sure that whatever's happened to you or whatever, you've experienced, what you've done, you don't unintentionally pass that on to the next person. Because I think where you're kind of going with this, Ian, is that these people tend to step into another interpersonal relationship that's almost a mirror of their past relationship, or they fall into one that's a healthy relationship but behave how they did in the unhealthy relationship and end up destroying somebody else or hurting somebody else.
Yeah,
I think that's where we're going with that.
Yeah, that's exactly what I'm talking about. Really, It's just when my idea was when you've been in a relationship that's not been great for whatever reason, it's just about having a little discussion and trying to see if we can give some hints and tips on moving forward in a healthy way to reforge relationships with new people. Or it could be just re-establishing old relationships. It doesn't have to be new relationships.
Yeah, I love what you mentioned right at the beginning of the show about boundaries. And I think from what I've seen and also from personal experience, whether it's with a romantic relationship, a work relationship, business relationship, family relationship, boundaries, and what boundaries do we need to put in place to protect ourselves. And again, it comes back to a couple of episodes ago when we were talking about that self-identity and what stories are we telling. Those are the patterns that we're playing out. And so we get to do the inner work, and so that we don't go into that next relationship with those unhealthy habits and behaviors. So again, I remember when I was dissatisfied in my marriage, and I've spoken very openly about this, and my ex-husband and I are actually really great friends now too. I thought everything else had to change around me. So I thought we needed to move again. I thought, if he changed, like all these things, and then actually no, it was me. It was me that had to change, and I didn't. That isn't why our marriage ended. It's another topic, but it's the only person you can change is yourself. You can't make other people change, and I wanted everybody else to change. So I got to work on myself, and then have boundaries. It's like, what am I a stand for? What am I willing to tolerate or not? And I think that's why it's so important to look at how are we showing up in all our relationships. It's not just the romantic one. It's not just what are we looking for? Where are we letting our boundaries go, or where are we letting our self-identity go? Because something I did do, which I'd done in a previous relationship, was they didn't like a particular book I'd read, and I'd loved it, and I'd highlighted it and underlined it when I'd gone backpacking in my 20s. And because this person I was getting into a relationship made a comment about it, they hadn't seen that, I got rid of the book. Like, oh my gosh, should I ever sell my own self-identity down the river with that one? And so it's been a process of doing the work. And what am I a stand for, and what am I proud of? And being willing to accept myself for who I am. And I encourage it with my clients. And I'm feeling more at liberty to share my personal stories rather than some of the clients, because to show you that we've all been there.
Yeah, I think it's shifting the narrative or shifting the blame as well. We talked earlier about personal responsibility. So, you get to a certain age in life, people tend to have failed relationships, divorces, whatever it may be. Certainly that's me. But I go, that was my fault. All of it was my fault. I take complete personal responsibility for that. Rather than going, if they just did this or they didn't do that and they did this, I made decisions. I chose to do things. I take responsibility for that. So what I mean by that is, if I then don't do something with that and then move forwards and continue to repeat the cycle, then it's on me. It's not on that person. This is not about. It's so much about they're this, they're that. They didn't do this. They treated me like this. You're like, no, I take personal responsibility for my stuff. And when you come from that place of going, it's down to me. I need to own that. You said something there that sort of resonated with me. It is about kind of not falling into that trap of making them the villain and you the victim. There's a big difference there. I'm not saying that people don't do bad things, but if you're going to give them all your energy by going, poor me, they did that to me, that's you're trapped in a place of helplessness. You're not empowering yourself to move forwards and become a better version of yourself. And if you look at all the narrative online with a lot of the dating stuff and advice and stuff, it's not your fault that, the person did this and they're like this and they're that. True. But it's your fault if you decide to stay in this mentality of, oh, look what's happened to me, or look who I've become because of the past of it. And they're not failed relationships, they're life lessons.
Yeah, definitely.
They taught you something.
Definitely life lessons, because all of my challenging relationships, and I'm very fortunate I've not been in an abusive relationship, I have learned something from them. It's changed, each relationship has changed who I am for the better. And I've learned so much more about myself. I'm in my 50s now. Like, I don't recognize the woman I was in my 20s. Like, I've taken something from each of these relationships, whether it's romantic, friendships, interpersonal relationships at work, like whatever it is. I have learned something from every single relationship, because I think that's how we evolve and grow. It's like, oh, I see how I showed up in that. Oh yeah, I see how that was not quite right, or I was a little off, or for whatever reason, because I think that's where we get to become healthier and more secure in ourselves, and then we get to have healthier and more secure relationships in whatever relationship that is.
Yeah, that's where I was going with it. I showed up like this, I acted like this, I did this. Like, there's times in my life where I've really not liked who I've become in a relationship. So you naturally want to blame it on, because they didn't do this, they didn't make me feel like that, they didn't make me happy and all this. No, that's you. You need to own that. And you need to you have a responsibility to fix that before you even consider stepping back into an interpersonal relationship, or the cycle will just continue. So the question you have to ask yourself is, what are the lessons learned?
Well, that's part of the healing process. So when we're saying you need to fix this, you need to heal, you need to take time to find out who you are. Because a lot of the time you come out of a relationship and you've got no idea who you are anymore. Chunks have just been taken off you left, right and centre, and there are pieces missing. It's just, you're not a complete puzzle. And it just takes time to put that back together and authentically understand who you are. Mm-hmm. Become happy in your own company. Mm-hmm. And once you're happy in your own company, you bring people in that complement it, not just to fill a void that was left there by somebody else. Mm-hmm. Really, really take the time.
Yeah. If you're completely honest, I mean, not that you need to be perfect, but if you carry unresolved stuff into a relationship, that's going to show up in the relationship, or you're going to be like a mirror and attract the unhealed parts of you in. So if you're anxious and you have a fear of abandonment, you're going to go, I'll ignore this because the person likes me and they're giving me their attention, and I'll place my happiness on as long as they keep, loving me, being with me, I'll be okay. And there's a difference between a relationship that just naturally runs its course and comes to an end because you want different things in life and all the rest of it, to actually there were things that weren't really looked at or healed that over time manifested into different things, and it's carrying that unhealed stuff. So like for me, earlier in my life with my sort of anxiety and my anxious attachment, I would find myself more in friendship groups, falling in with people that I knew weren't good for me because there was acceptance. Yeah. rather than like, well, you know, if I don't comply, if I don't fall into line, they may not like me anymore. Then I feel like I've got no friends and therefore I don't belong. And I can see how that pattern followed me through my life and led me into situations that weren't good for me.
That's almost you abandoning yourself to meet your own basic human needs. You're kind of making morality and, well, yourself, you're making that a luxury that comes after your need to be accepted, be part of the pack.
But also, I think part of self-reflection, looking at your part in it and all the rest of it, I don't regret any of those things because now I can look at it and every single one of them taught me something. Yeah. I wasn't always able to see the lesson. It's actually been a lot later in life where you can kind of go, that was trying to teach me this. I needed to see that. I needed to experience that. It's whether you take what the lesson was and you run with it.
Yeah, I've noticed with clients, if there's a repeating pattern and they're saying, why does this keep happening to me? Or I'm always getting into these relationships. That's when so what is it that you're repeating and going on? Because as we've been reflecting, is when you do the inner work and start to recognize the lessons, it's like then you can shift and you go, oh yeah, like that's not going to happen again, because people do repeat patterns until they figure it out, because they're generally repeating a pattern of what's familiar. And we all know that, you know, the people who then do heal and then they end up in a calm relationship and they find it boring because there's no chaos, there's no drama, because they think that's excites them. But it's actually, I think, to be in a relationship which is peaceful and it can be exciting. So it's having that balance. But you need to get to a point where you've seen, okay, I see the pattern I'm repeating. I get to work on me, and then you get to work on you, and then you get to show it to the next relationship, having worked on yourself, and meet somebody who's also worked on themselves, which we were talking about earlier, where you get to meet somebody who's at that same level as you.
Matches your energy.
Yeah, matches your energy.
And that's how I use the word mirroring, really.
Yeah.
Trying to, like, if you're in a low place, in a low state, and you're projecting yourself out there, you're either going to attract somebody else in a low state or somebody that wants to take advantage of you in that state. Whereas if your vibration is high and you're out there projecting yourself in a good place, you're really confident, what you're mirroring yourself out there to is completely different.
I heard a dating coach that I'm aware of recently said something that really resonated with me, and it was a really powerful statement, because I think we're all conditioned to like what love is in a relationship, you know, and it's that kind of when you were younger, you're like, oh my God, and there's energy and it's fizzling, and, you know, and there's all that sort of what I call like positive anxiety.
Yeah.
And he actually said that's not love. That is actually normally a massive red flag waving. True love is feeling completely at peace, feeling at calm, you know, none of this mental intensity that we think that it actually is. But I think a lot of us are conditioned, and that's where you glaze over the things that actually you should really be paying attention to. And I think that's how people find themselves in repeating patterns of chaos. And
toxic behaviour.
Toxic, yeah.
And again, my definition of a toxic relationship is one where you find yourself constantly experiencing this myriad of different emotions. It could be disappointment, hurt, happy, whatever. But you just, rather than just being calm and having something that's just steady, and like you said, that's what I denote it. And then you find yourself where you're willing to feel rejected, small, unloved, just so you can grasp onto those few moments that you're given where you feel special.
Almost like you romanticise the potential of how it should be, but it's never quite there.
And those good bits outweigh this massive amount of time when you just feel rubbish and how you're made to feel. And this, you know, I see this in family dynamics as well as relationships. And really, you need to be saying, no, that is a toxic relationship, and that's not good for me.
If you're feeling worse more of the time than you're feeling good,
something's off.
Something's off.
Something's wrong. And it is hard, isn't it, to take a good, honest look at yourself and go, actually, I did this wrong, that, I need to fix this and I need to fix that, and really need to take a good look at that. Because what we will do is we will detract away, or we will find unhealthy coping mechanisms to move us away from the stuff where we actually need focus. And really, people say, oh, well, it's not my fault. And, it's not your fault what's happened to you in your past, but it is your responsibility to change what's happened to you in your past. And people will go and spend a ridiculous amount of money on iPhone or aftershave or perfume or cars, but won't go and pay for therapy to clean their stuff up so they don't carry it forwards and bleed on to somebody else. And that comes back to this personal responsibility at the beginning, which is going, that's nobody else's fault but your own. And if you keep choosing these situations, they're not being put upon you, choosing them, then you need to take a look at yourself.
That's the same as people that say, I'm attracted to a bad lad, or
bad boys.
Bad boys,
Bad
yeah.
boys.
And then I don't really like it when they treat me like a bad boy. That's...
Well, the thing is, if you've come from chaos and that's all you've ever known, you actually, peace will feel alien to you. It'll feel unsafe. If you've grown up in, I'm not an expert on this, but I do know that if you've grown up in chaos, you get used to chaos, and your unconscious identity is of somebody that comes from that. And if you find peace and calm and all the rest of it, you'll find a way of unconsciously sabotaging that, because it doesn't feel safe, and that's because people aren't fixing their stuff. And that it is about owning your stuff.
Yeah, and it does sound crazy when we say, oh, well, somebody who's used to chaos, that's what they seek and that's where they find safety. What it is that's what we're unconsciously... in this context, that's what's familiar. So it's not necessarily where you go, oh my gosh, but no, that's not safe. It's like, no, what's familiar. So unconsciously you go, okay, I know this, right? I know how to be in this environment, in this relationship. Okay, I can do this. It's familiar, and therefore it's safe. Mm-hmm. And changing that is scary and unfamiliar, therefore it's not safe. So we're not even talking about whether it's physical violence or anything like that. It's a neurological safety. It's an unconscious safety. And it's not a healthy one. It's like, okay, work on yourself, realizing that this isn't what a healthy relationship is. Whether it's romantic or friendship, I mean, we see the dynamic play out in all relationships. So working on yourself and getting to know yourself. We've talked about that a lot in previous episodes. Knowing what you stand for, knowing what your boundaries are, having a sense of your own sense of worth and your own value and your own security. Like, find safety in yourself first. And that alone can be uncomfortable for people and therefore scary and unsafe. But when someone can come, like I call it coming home to yourself, when you can feel at home with yourself, it's a game changer.
Yeah, me and Ian have spent times talking about this, because we grew up together, and we were either in the same circle of friends or we all knew each other's circle of friends. And I think we both can relate to how, ironically, we ended up breaking away ultimately from those circles, because at the time we were gravitating around certain individuals that there was type of people that we were around, because you either thought they were cool, or if you hung around them you were safe, or you were part of something, you were a community. But they were idiots, and they were going nowhere in life. And by staying in that, you were going on exactly the same path as they were on. And we've talked about how fortunate we are that life events took us right away from those individuals, because we talk about it to this day. They're still doing the same stuff that we thought was stupid at 14, and they're still, we're not criticising them, but you can see how, I've got a type, whether that's a type of partner that you look for or a type of friend that you look for.
But part of that group of friends, they were, again, I'm not going into criticising certain people, but those weren't really positive circles. Now, I look at my friendship group now, and I'm very blessed. So I've come into the therapy world, I'm sat with you guys. When I'm riding my motorbikes, my friends riding the British Championships. And what it is, a friend asked me about this, and I know what it is. It's because we're all so supportive of each other, and when one of us has got a dream, we want to pivot. Yes, how can I make that happen? That's a great idea. And because we're so positive, we attract. Our vibrations attract people, and we tend to push each other on because we give each other that support and that self-belief. And when one of us doubts, one of us goes, I'm not sure if I can do it. I did with you when I first come up to train, and go, give your head a wobble. What you've got here is incredible. You just need to regain sight of that.
Yeah.
And I have people that will do that all the time. You do it with me. You're great. But then in that circle, we had people that would criticise. They would be that 9 out of 10 people that would say, oh, no, you can't do that. That's dangerous. That's not what everybody else is doing. You're an idiot. You'll never make it. People like us don't achieve those things. Mm-hmm. And by staying in that circle, that's exactly what that circle have done. That circle have lived in that, within that sort of rhetoric that they've created for themselves, and that's where they've stayed.
Yeah.
Whereas me, you, and one other that we generally talk about, we've all gone off to find
different paths,
incredible
different
lives.
places,
We've had incredible experience, incredible lives, and it's off the back of a new support network, positive friends, people that actually understand you, and even if they don't understand your goals, they respect them and encourage.
And the thing is, these types, these people that you attract into your life, you bring into your life, or you gravitate towards, I'm not saying that they're bad people. They're just not right for you.
Yeah.
And that's what's so important with this, owning your stuff, to make sure that you bring the right people into your world.
People that won't kill your vision.
Yeah, and
won't take your power.
In the previous episode where we talked about pivoting, we were talking about this too. Remember, I shared with the client who felt empowered because we literally held her coat, quite frankly, while she goes and does the thing. It's be around the people who are going to inspire you. It's like community. It's like, because we all want to belong to a community, and choose the community.
Do you think in some ways you almost have to go and find out what's wrong for you to really appreciate what's right for you? Do you get what I'm saying?
That seems to be how I've done it, yeah. I'm not sure it's the only way.
Yeah, but it enables you to really appreciate that. That's kind of where I'm going with it. So you could sit here and go, past friendships, past relationships or failures, or were they just life's way of teaching you what you needed to know about yourself, what you needed to heal, and actually what's right for you? Because what I have learned and I've experienced, both personally and by watching and speaking to clients in the therapy room, is sometimes the right stuff gets put on the path and they're not able to see it, or they squander it.
Yep.
Again, are we seeing obstacles or opportunities? Are we seeing failures, or are we seeing an opportunity to learn and lessons?
It depends how you look at it. Someone once said to me, these things that are happening is the universe preparing you for the life that you said that you wanted. And I think that's very... Now I look back, at the time I didn't understand it, but now I'm a far more resilient version of myself that would have never have got the things I...
So, ironically, in a kind of way, what we're sort of saying, and don't get me wrong, it does take a bit of time to get to this headspace, is the individuals that you encounter through your life, at one point you would have, you did this to me, you didn't do that for me, you did that. Ironically, you can find stuff you could actually thank them for.
Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you for the lesson. Thank you for showing me the parts of me that I needed to look at. And thank you, because you probably learnt things from these people and they've helped you, do different things. I was talking to somebody it was a very good while ago, and their voice stuck in my mind. They were in a very abusive relationship. But she goes, the positive I've taken away from it is they were an amazing cook, and they've taught me how to cook loads of things, and that's something I can use for the rest of my life. And that's the positive I'll take from a very dark place.
I love that.
Yeah.
Well, people aren't always designed to be in your life forever. Your paths are meant to cross, and you'll come in and out, you'll learn your lessons, and then move on. And the other thing is, we're all, if you see life as a book, some of us are just one chapter ahead of others. So it's important to have in your life people that are that chapter ahead. So they'll pull you forward, they'll teach you. But at the same time, then you try and guide the people that are one chapter back.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
I
you
think that coach that I was referring to earlier says something along the lines of, it's not how you feel about them, it's about how they make you feel.
yes.
Yeah.
That you have to sit and think about that for a moment, because I can look back at, you know, some of the people we were knocking about with when we were younger, and they made me feel quite on edge and quite anxious, and certainly not secure.
No, absolutely.
You know, and at times chaotic, and you become part of the chaos. It's that whole village mentality, isn't it? You don't want to be the outsider looking in the village, you want to be in the village looking out, kind of thing. So yeah, that big phrase of, it's not how you feel about them, it's about how they make you feel, or the majority of it is about how they make you feel. I mean, like, you can love somebody or something, but if it absolutely makes you feel like death, and you're anxious and you're overthinking, you're second guessing and all the rest of it, there's more in that, isn't there?
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's why it does take, normally, quite a lot of getting it wrong until you start to get it right. And more people seem to be figuring it out a lot later in life. Some people just get it right early on, and that's fantastic, but others are still discovering. We never stop evolving, do we, really? You know, it's, you know, you look at relationships with bosses and certain family members as well. You know, that's a dynamic that's very difficult to maintain, and we keep responding and behaving in a way to manage that situation and go, hang on a minute, this is not for me to do that. I can actually change the way that I do it. But I kind of want to sort of circle back to where Ian brought us in on this conversation, which I know we're skirting on that fine line of going into an area which is a big piece that we could almost do with bringing an expert in. But to me, I was picking up from you, Ian, that it's like somebody, for whatever reasons, found themselves single or out of a marriage or whatever it is, and they're about to step back into the world of dating, meeting people, you know, or whatever it is. It's not carrying with you what you're bringing from the past so the history can continue to repeat itself.
That's it. And it's also being able to see somebody through. I mean, I'm not saying ignore all the red flags. I'm not saying always take with you what you learn. Keep yourself protected. But how many opportunities would it open up if you just saw somebody and actually taken somebody on their own face value, and then got to know somebody without having a preconception that they're like your ex-partner or they'll behave like they did? How good would it be just to enjoy somebody's company and see where it went without red flags and alarm bells going off everywhere?
So it's own your stuff. And
Own your stuff.
Yeah,
own your stuff and
yes.
clean your issues up.
Yeah, absolutely. Don't go and project that onto somebody else. And like I said, take your time to heal, know who you are. So you can attract people that complement who you are and who you want to be, not people who you were and that will drag you back to who you were. You know, you've evolved, you've come out of a relationship, you've learnt, you're evolved, you're moving forwards. So you want to meet somebody that's going to carry you forwards or not hamper you in that journey, who can be part of you know, or your authentic self. As well. And one of my clients was saying the other week that she went out on a date. She wasn't really feeling it, but she went out on a date. And this guy sat opposite. Firstly, he said he was 6'2", and I think he was 4'11", which instantly put her. But they got 3 words in, and he sat at the table. It's turned into a therapy session because he's wound up sitting there saying how he hasn't got over his ex.
Oh.
And this poor girl, she's wound up going halves on a dinner for providing him with a therapy session because he's just not ready to be out there, but he's just desperately grasping for something to fill the void that's been left by the person that left him. And I'm just thinking that's not healthy, because you'll just bring anybody in to fulfill that basic need that you've got. And there's so much other stuff that you'll just ignore to fill that void.
Yeah.
Which is why I'm saying just take the time to heal, But then I've got another friend on another, and he's just got his confidence together, and he's just going into everything with a really, really light-hearted, no expectations, and he's having an absolute ball, and he's striking up some really great friendships and relationships as he goes, because that pressure's off, and he's just not pushing any preconceptions on anything. He's just taking everybody on their own merits, really.
Feeling comfortable just being yourself.
Yes.
And
but what he'd done is he'd taken the time to heal. So he's perfectly happy living on his own. So if he's ready for a relationship, but he's only going to bring somebody else if it adds to or complements him and his life. And that's the difference between bringing somebody in just to fill the void and bringing somebody in when you're healed and ready.
Yeah, so if you've got anxieties and traumas from your past.
Yeah.
I mean, most people that end up in the therapy room, a lot of the stuff that impacts their relationships in adult life is from childhood.
Yes.
From things that happen with parents and siblings.
In my experience, every time.
Agreed, yeah, 100%. Absolutely 100%. And if you've come from a childhood where people leave, or, there's been toxic divorce, very disruptive, explosive divorces and stuff like that, then that definitely seeps in. Not in all cases, but in a lot of cases, it'll start to show up in different areas in the relationship. And normally they've been through a good few relationships where they start to go, hang on, there's something going on here with me. I need to take a look at this and I need to fix it, because this, I've been thinking it's them, but actually it's me, because you do attract what you've not healed.
Yeah,
that's
exactly.
a fact.
If you don't take the time to heal, you just keep revisiting the same situation.
Yeah, if you're secure and you feel good in yourself and you're okay being alone, odds are you'll mirror that and you'll draw it into you.
And you're at the point where you get to break the cycle.
Yes.
If something's happened in the past.
Yeah.
And that's what it's about. That's how we protect our loved ones. That's how we protect the people that we bring in close. We break the cycle of what's happened previously. Sometimes that just takes a little bit of time to could take therapy a lot of time, depending on what it is. But it's important that those things that hurt us, we don't project onto those people that we profess to love later on. We break that cycle and we make that change. And that has to happen within you first. And
breaking that cycle, this applies to our children. Like, are we going to repeat the patterns that we've learned in our childhood and how to relate, that we've taken into adulthood, and then we have our children, and because there's certainly been times when I've gone, oh my gosh, I'm just like, one or other parent, and we get to heal for ourselves, for the relationship we're going into, for those that we are raising, or whether they're our own children or extended family, nieces and nephews. So, I mean, working on ourselves supports us in all relationships, in all areas, and it heals and we're not putting our past traumas into other relationships, including those of our children.
Yeah, I think, we have to take a look at our past. And this might rustle a few feathers, and people might get a bit triggered by it, but it's true, they say, if you're looking at a life partner, you have to look at the family and the family history to understand where that person's come from and what their viewpoint of relationships may be. Does that mean just because somebody's parents have got divorced young, they're not an ideal partner? Absolutely not. But there are clues in how that individual may show up in relationships. That same dating coach that I was referring to said something like, if you meet somebody, especially if you're considering going dating, how did your last relationship end, and what work have you done on yourself since then? What have you learned about yourself to move forwards? Because a lot of people, and I've been guilty in this in the past, of like, nothing, just move on and just keep doing what you're doing and expect a different outcome, and then surprise, the same problems crop up because you've not looked at and done the work. And I think that's really key, whether it is with your friends or it is in your love life or wherever it is. You've got to be able to reflect, look back, see where things haven't gone right, ask yourself what work you need to do, then do the work, and then move forwards.
That's right. Establish what your boundaries are.
Yeah, and you can heal with somebody, but you have to at least be on that journey, and that person needs to be the right person for you. I'm definitely a believer there are right people for you and wrong people for you.
Yes.
And it normally, not always, normally takes you spending a lot of time with the wrong people to actually find out what your thoughts or views of the right person was actually skewed by stuff that's gone on in your past.
Yes.
Yeah. Difficult subject to talk about, but it does impact us, and I think it is about just owning your, I won't say the word, owning your stuff, and being brutally honest with it, and facing, just standing in the mirror and taking a good long look at yourself, which is uncomfortable at times, and doing the work.
Do the work.
Doing the work.
And a lot of the subjects that we have skirted around, we will at some point do a show about them, maybe invite some experts on. So don't feel anyone listening, it's like, oh, I really wanted you to go down that route. There's lots of opportunity for us to go further with this. And we do plan to have some experts that we will be having on our show to interview. So
yeah, I'll stand behind anxiety and talk about it all day. But this is a very different subject, and don't want to be one of these just do what I say, because I've not got it right, and you don't want to be a hypocrite in this situation, do you? It's like people are still figuring this out in life, and you've got, but there are other people that have just got it sussed. They just know it, and they see it, they eat, sleep and breathe it. So that's why we would bring somebody in that really niches down on that knows it almost 4-dimensionally.
yeah.
But it was a good conversation piece to have for sure. So thanks for bringing that subject to the table. I'm going to pass that hot potato back to you now, Ian. We can bring this episode to an end. So thanks for listening, and we'll catch you in the next episode.
Thank you.
Thank you.
If you or someone close to you needs to access mental health support, please contact your GP, or if it's out with normal office hours, get in touch with NHS 24 on 111. Alternatively, contact the Samaritans on 116 123. All calls are free of charge from any phone. You can also find more support information on the Tickety Boo website, ticketyboopodcast.co.uk.